So, Barbara, thank you for joining me on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that today,
Thanks so much for having me.
all the way from Sydney. So we've got this huge time difference between us from the UK and Australia, but really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Let me just say, we're in the middle of this of a tech revolution, primarily driven by AI today, and it seems to be just growing exponentially. And I'm really want to explore the impact that is having on organizations, particularly the psychology on people and people's behavior, people's psychology and behavior. So just to kick us off, I mean, give me your perspective as to the organizations that you're dealing with, that you work with. How is this tech revolution, how is that impacting them?
Look, I think it's a myriad of different answers. There are people at varying stages of, everything from fear to excitement to anxiety and everything in between.
Right.
I think when ChatGPT first launched, I think a lot of people had extreme amounts of confusion, fear, anxiety, overwhelm, but also excitement at the same time at what it might be able to do. I feel like we've sort of reached a moment now where businesses are starting to finally tackle it. Now, that might seem like it's late, because ChatGPT has been around for ages and things have been moving very quickly. But I really do feel that we're only really at the point where companies have been able to digest what's happened and actually figure out, apart from doing some funky things with ChatGPT, what are the actual business use cases? And are those business use cases really that useful yet? Is it replacing people or is it augmenting people? And where does it all fit? And I think we're only in that phase right now where the ordinary business on the street is really starting to think about this properly.
Okay, so we're on that initial trajectory, if you may. Yeah. So what are you picking up out there in terms of not the leadership in the organizations, but just the ordinary employees, the ordinary folk? How are they responding to this?
Yeah, it's funny, because even the people in my company, I mean, we have 350 staff, and I noticed that a lot of people picked it up. A lot of people started using it much faster than I did. People were sort of realizing, oh, I can get this email out quicker, or, oh, I can summarize this document. So people who are really in the trenches with the work every day, I think those people are picking it up much faster and starting to use the tools because they can finally free up some of their own time. A lot of people are very overwhelmed with too much work. I mean, we're all drowning in work these days, right? So I think that's been a real trend. I think the leadership part of it is probably catching up now. I mean, the tech people, of course, they've always been there. But the place that we see it the most, I think the places it has hit very quickly are things like customer support, marketing assistance. So, the whole social media game has become maybe a lot harder and a lot easier to run, but a lot harder to gain success in because of AI. So there's a lot of big shifts happening there. I really do see a lot of people in the workflows who are starting to use it. There are some people who are afraid of it, though. They feel like this can, maybe there's a fear that it's going to take their jobs or whatever if they embrace it too much. But I still feel that's kind of breaking now. I think,
In my just last week, in my latest edition of the Nexus newsletter, I wrote about this concept called shadow AI, where a lot of employees are using AI without the sort of formal permission of the IT department or any other department. So they're kind of almost going rogue to do it. And sometimes it might be the leaders themselves for various motivations in terms of why they want to do that. But what are your thoughts of that, where employees are sort of, working in the shadows with this? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it?
Well, it's interesting, actually, just as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, I really feel that people view ChatGPT or, Perplexity in particular is an up and coming thing right now. People just view it like Google. They're just like, well, you Google something or you put it in ChatGPT. So I don't really think people are thinking about a shadow concept. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but my sense is that I don't think employees are thinking about it that way. Maybe in large enterprises where they know there are some privacy things, but in general, I feel people are just looking at it like the next Google, which is way better, way better, faster, etc. I don't think people fully understand the privacy issues, the data leaks, that's the next coming issue that's coming where
Yes.
we don't realize the stuff we're putting in there
Yes.
is now being used to train the models, right? So
Right.
I
Right.
reckon that's going to be the next big crackdown that will come from a
Yeah.
lot of companies. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting because it also seems to be growing exponentially. I mean, every time you go on social media, like on LinkedIn, there's another article about an iteration of AI. And I think I wanted to get your thoughts on this because one of my philosophies is that people think that AI is just like a single product, like it's like a Microsoft software
Yeah.
package or something, and yet it's thousands of iterations of this process called AI. And AI, in my opinion, its sole purpose is to try and mimic the human brain in any way it can, and it's moving in that direction. And so I just wanted to gather your thoughts on this concept of how do you think that AI is developing, and are we able to keep up with that in organizations? Because with organizations, as you know, something happens and there's a program or a training or something that's thrown at it, and then it's very sort of reactive, if you may, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you're chasing technology that is growing and developing and morphing so quickly, that's a real challenge in organizations today.
Oh, massive. I mean, I think there's so many things to unpack there. I think some organizations will do nothing for a long time, and
Mm,
then all of a sudden they will just sort of leapfrog into the newest thing. And I think that will be at the enterprise level, that will be driven by companies like ServiceNow. I mean, Salesforce has just come out with their
yes,
Agent Force
yes,
concept. So I think at the enterprise level, you're going to see huge leapfrogs where they will bypass all of the crap in the middle that the rest of us are dealing with at the with the trial and error. At the other end of the spectrum, I think there's been a whole plethora of like SaaS tools coming out, which are very
mm,
specific for specific things.
mm,
Some of those will be amazing, but the technology is changing so quickly that I almost wonder whether those will get commoditized away. Like, why would
yeah,
you buy a SaaS tool when you can just program something yourself?
yes,
So
yes,
there's going to be this. It's a very broad space. I think the really smart, nimble, clever startups will figure out how to do it themselves very
yeah,
quickly. And there could end up being almost a kind of if you imagine like a SaaS war, where you have
yeah,
the big sales forces, etc.,
yes,
taking over all the enterprise, and then maybe the smaller end of the market or the mid market, I think, starting to play to build things themselves and go like, why
mm,
do we need? I think it
mm,
was I can't remember the name of the company. Was it Klarna came out last week and said that they were actually going to get rid of Salesforce and they were building their own
yes,
whatever in the workflows. So I think that's a game that's going to play out. I think also AI, it's interesting because I feel like, it's the market is going to go this way. Again, the upper end of the market of people who are very strategic, extremely innovative, and very
yes,
creative will lead. And the lower end of the middle market people, I think, is where the problem is going to lie. Because what I'm seeing, I mean, I've got a company in the Philippines and we have support assistants in the Philippines. And originally I thought, well, this is, it's going to kill call
mm,
centers. And we don't
mm,
do call centers, but it's
mm,
going to sort of it's going to really take over that end of the market. But interestingly, what I've noticed in the last year is our support assistants are getting better. They're augmenting so far that they can do way more. And that's an interesting thing as well. So now you can have this sort of high-low strategy on steroids where you've got extremely creative, strategic people, and then great execution
mm,
very cost effectively because you've got AI plus things like offshore teams and stuff like that. So I
yeah,
think it's almost like there's a moment in the markets where it's creative destruction, where there's a lot of these big forces going to start colliding. And we're
yeah,
not sure
yeah.
yet where the whole thing is going to
Where
land.
it's going to
But that's
land.
what I'm seeing. That's what I'm really seeing.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's really, I like that almost like a hybrid sort of model
Mm.
is developing. So given on that theme, just going on that theme, which industries do you think are, from your perspective, are really being challenged by AI and this revolution?
Well, marketing massively,
Yeah.
marketing and sales hugely. Maybe because I'm more exposed to those, but definitely marketing was the first one because in marketing in general, and anyone who's a CMO out there, or VP of marketing will know, or anyone in marketing will know, that the problem with marketing is that the 20% of it is strategic, and that's vitally important. But then there's 80% execution that is a lot of grunt work that needs to be done. And AI has taken over a huge portion of that. I mean, automation of 10 years ago took over a lot of it, and now the AI thing has really come in there, not just in the creatives, but more in the process driven sort of stuff. And then in the sales side, SDRs, the sales development people, have all of a sudden been either augmented or gotten rid of because the AI is coming. Of course, call centers. I mean, customer support is about to go through an absolute enormous rollover. How that looks in a year or two, I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of damage done in that arena for people, and those people will have to reskill and sort of figure out what they're doing, which is a challenge for emerging markets and places like that, where a lot of those call centers are. Philippines in particular, I see big problems there. Yeah.
And I've also noticed on that theme, in some of the countries around the world where developing local talent is very important, and creating and job creation is very important. And they're having to balance between using artificial intelligence and automation with job creation. And there seems to be some of them are really struggling with that concept. We need to create 1 million jobs, but I have a technology that can do most of that now. So what are your thoughts on that, on sort of country level job creation versus this advent of this new technology? So.
Well, okay, that's a big one to unpack. So I think in the era that we're in with this, we are in this, it's like a washing machine of change. I mean, it's literally like a volcanic eruption of change.
Yes.
And in any period like that, it's going to be very tumultuous for a lot of people. People are going to lose jobs, but other jobs are going to get created, but we don't know yet what that really looks like.
Yeah.
I think reskilling, I think governments are going to have to really think about reskilling. We're going to have to think about how we teach our children, how we educate people, how we reskill people. But on the plus side, we do have an issue globally where there is a mismatch of skills. There are productivity issues. There are not enough people in some countries to actually do the work. Like I know in the States, even in Australia, Canada, even in Europe, it's difficult to find the people. Now, you can go to countries like the Philippines and find people, of course, but I feel like this combination of the world equalizing a bit and more global workforces coming together, distributed teams, which I know is kind of a dirty word at the moment, but that paired with AI is actually going to create a world that is super powerful, and we are going to come out stronger after that, if you think about the growth that we can achieve. But I just feel in the middle piece, there's going to be a lot of toing and froing and creative destruction, which exciting for some, scary for others.
Yeah, and in the midst of all that, you have governments who are also then trying to catch up in terms of legislation. How do we control this? Can we control it? Which part can we control?
Look, I think the data security stuff will slow it down, to be honest. I think eventually companies will start to, I mean, I have no basis for saying this, only I imagine what generally happens in these types of scenarios. When new things come about, everyone is excited. You get the first big massive boom where it moves really quickly. And then things sort of plateau at some point. The technology is probably not going to plateau. But I feel like the adoption, I don't know. I think there will be issues around security, privacy. And I'm not an expert in this. So I'm just sort of imagining that that's what probably will come.
Yeah. So is it suffice to say that your organization is looking at how to implement AI and take advantage of it? At the same time, I'm sure you're looking to support your clients. What's best, how best to support your clients. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of where you guys are going with this?
Yeah. So I've sort of been developing this philosophy around this for the last year or so, since I've seen this whole, revolution happen. And I feel like the org structure that we used to have, I think, is about to go through a massive shift. So the way org structures happen inside companies, the traditional way of all the different roles, people reporting to each other, etc., and the way we recruit is always roles based, We
Yes.
need this role or we need that role. I really feel that's going to go through a massive shift and a massive change. And it's going to look like this. I feel like you're going to have key roles at the top, potentially a little bit lower. Then you're going to need a data layer, a very strong live feeding data layer, so you can have your dashboards. So data and the accuracy of data is already very important, but it's going to become even more important.
Even more important, yeah.
Then you need process mapping is one of those things that is so boring for most people. But unfortunately, if you want to bring AI in, process map, you need to have your process. You need to have your data and you need your process maps.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't automate that, or AI can't really do much for you, right? So that's going to become very important. And then the two layers I think that are going to dominate are the more that you process map and the more live data you have, the more it's going to expose what I call the support layer, which is kind of in your execution layer. So people who can come in cost effectively and actually execute those process maps for you. And then, of course, there's going to be the AI layer. You're going to still need people, but there's going to be an AI layer that is going to take a lot of that process mapping, execution type work and do it. And I don't know, like I said, I'm not an expert in AI. I just sort of follow this and see where I think it's going. But I feel like that's going to be the org structure of the future company, where you think in these terms of these layers and who are the people that are, or the AIs that are going to do tasks as opposed to roles.
Yeah,
interesting. I really feel that's where it's going. Yeah.
I'm sure the process mappers that are listening to you, all some dollar signs are going to find.
Their time has finally come for process mapping and optimization. But just on that, where we're using it, I mean, we're using it twofold. Right. We're actually still getting quite a lot of demand for support people. So we're still seeing a demand for people. And of course, I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that, people, it's hard to hire people in America, UK, whatever. But also this idea of the support layer, I think, is gathering pace, where you go, well, do we need our key people earning 200 grand a year to be spending 50% of their day doing process work? Some of that's going to be done by support teams. Some of that's going to be done by AI. Now, for us, we're already in the Philippines, right? So we already have the cost-effective support layer. That's what we actually are. So for a company like us, we have to bring in AI because we, in order for us to get more efficient, we already have cost effectivity in our staffing, right? So AI is quite important for us, and we've been putting AI in our HR teams, through our customer success teams, and just dabbling with it there to test it out. Yeah.
It sounds like you guys have really sort of not shirked from this, but you've kind of lent into it.
You have to lean into it, yeah.
Yeah, and so just in closing, just some final advice that you could give to maybe even your potential clients that are listening to you, or other organizations that are watching this. How should they approach this? How can they best take advantage of this?
Okay, so I think what you just said is key. You have to, this thing is not going away, right? This thing is here to stay, and this thing is moving at an exponential speed. So first of all, you have to lean into it. However, don't get overwhelmed by it, because you can't, Rome wasn't built in a day. And the way to start this is to just, I think, if I could advise anyone, it's a little bit like the process mapping thing. It's a painful thing to sit down and map an organization and figure out what are all the tasks going on. And once you start there, it starts to expose things that can be automated, things that can be delegated, things that AI can do. And you start there rather than going to the tool or going to AI. First map the organization or the company. And I think that's a great place to start to help you work this out. Yeah.
You almost have to mimic AI in the sense that, stop, slow down, think it through logically, break it into smaller pieces, create a process. Even halfway through, you can adjust the process. And on you go until you come up with your own unique schematic, your own unique system to manage this. Yeah.
I do think eventually organizations, though, and companies are going to have a dedicated, because at the moment what's happening is leaders are trying to empower their people to do it. And that's great because the leaders are leading from the top, but your people don't have time, right, for this. Yes. Some of them will be interested, but eventually it's going to have to be a function. And we're hoping at the Virtual Hub that we are going to start building some AI things. We have an operational efficiency team of system architects that we do a lot of automation already, and we're hoping to add AI eventually into that so that we can help companies to do that. But I do think it's going to be a dedicated function eventually.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it may sit in IT, it may not sit in IT. It's going to require, people who have a clear vision, clear understanding, not just understand data, but can see the big picture. At the same time, be able to see, excuse me, the smaller pieces of that picture, almost the pixels. And I think that's going to be an interesting sort of iteration and development of this role. Okay. Just as we close, any final thoughts? Any other? You've given us some great sort of jewels of wisdom, if I can put it that way. Any final thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the only final thing I would say is, I think we're in the era of scaling smarter, if I could say it that way, and all the tools that are, like we're not in zero interest rate anymore. Margin squeeze is real. Employees are overwhelmed and drowning in work, and all of these issues are there. And it is time to start thinking about, I guess I would call it people optimization, like optimize your people strategy. And you can do that by, having things like AI, cost-effective offshore teams, automation, process mapping, and proper architecture, all of the above. And what you do with that then is you free up the most expensive asset that you have in any company, which is your people's time and energy. And you do that with all of those tools. And I think that's the easiest way to think about it.
Okay. Barbara, thank you so much. That has been extremely enlightening. I really appreciate you taking the time. You're in Australia, I'm in the UK, so I appreciate the time difference. And so thank you again for joining us today on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Barbara, thank you. That was fantastic. That was really good.
Yeah, that was great. I really enjoyed that. That's the first time I've been asked about AI. I mean, I have a keen interest in it, though. I do follow it. So
Yeah.
That's great.
It sounds like you guys are doing some really good things. I mean, obviously, we're continuing our conversation, but this will all be edited and so.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So it sounds like you. Maybe we could work together in another way, and maybe we can do another episode like this, or something even more specific that you want to share. It'd be great to have you to share a product or service, or a product or service, or something that we can sort of weave around this theme, in the future. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. We're developing. We're not there yet. So that's why I just dropped that in as a sort of a nugget, because we're not, we have built we built a sort of a customer support thing for a smaller business using AI, but nothing, we used the Zendesk AI tool rather than build it from scratch. Right. Yeah, we're not ready for that yet. Yeah. I'd like it to get us there, but yeah.
So one of the things I'm doing at the show is with this blog is, looking at research and obviously some modeling and some models and concepts around this tech revolution that's been driven by AI. But I'm also going to we're also going to introduce case studies. So talk to, apart from case studies that already exist in the market that one can speak about, but I want to bring guests on the show like you who are maybe have developed something or kind of are doing something without giving your proprietary stuff away. Yeah. Just say, look, we're working with company X in this part of the world, and this is what we've done, and this is how we've connected the dots for them. It'll be great to have you on board again to do that at some stage. So
yeah, I'd love to. I mean, what's interesting, actually, some of the companies we are working with, we have some larger clients that we work with on their operational framework specifically.
Oh, interesting.
And they, interestingly, you would not believe the amount of companies that are still out there that are still operating on spreadsheets and email. Like they haven't even mastered marketing automation of 10 years ago. So I didn't want to say this on the thing, but like sometimes when people ask me about AI, I'm just like, look, there are companies that are not even on the automation of 10 years ago, let alone AI. And for them, they probably will leapfrog, but it's going to take a while.
It's going to take a while.
And the change management of the people is just like, some people are never going to get there.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because I was having a conversation yesterday with a company in the States, and they're a marketing company, and they've been around for 20 years, and they're just a small company, but they make about $10 to $15 million a year. Yeah. There's only 6 of them, and the entire company is based on a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, by two. It happens to be two women who've been there since year one, and nobody knows what they do, but they have this magic, and it just has worked. And and
see,
so
AI is never going to be able to replace that magic. That's
yes,
why they're going to be successful. So
yes,
they could use AI, but they kind of almost don't need to, because the magic is what makes it.
yeah, and it's almost like if they stop that magic and try and sort of re-gear or gear up again, it may just be the demise of many organizations who've got a good
Yeah.
thing going. So why change it? So it'll be interesting to
Yeah.
see.
But
Interesting
like I
to
said,
see.
it's that high-low thing. I think they're in the space where they are the super upper end, and they should probably raise their pricing to be done. Like eventually, people will pay for that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
everything else will be cookie cutter.
Yeah,
Because AI
exactly.
can't.
Exactly.
I mean, unless it gets there, I don't know. But yeah, that's interesting. They have the secret sauce, and they should. They don't need all the bells and whistles to do it.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah. But I mean, we're working with a company here in Australia. It's an asset management company, makes truckloads of money, and they are email and spreadsheets, and we're just like, we've managed to get them onto Monday.com. We did a massive Monday project with them, and we did a lot of Power BI dashboards for them, and that was game changing for them. But get this right, I told them in the beginning, because I didn't do the consulting, but I know them, so I did the original sale, and I said to the COO, I said, if we could clear the amount of time, 30% of the time spent in and around meetings in this company, it would be game changing. And he said to me, that doesn't feel like a goal that's wow enough for me to present to the board. And I said, yeah, it sounds boring, doesn't it? I said, but wait till you see what happens when we do it. And the amount of time people were spending gathering data, preparing slide decks, getting ready for the meetings, and then the follow-up, and then presenting it all in the meeting. So the meeting would be 2 hours, because you had to do an hour to get everyone up to speed.
Just to get it going, yeah.
And then the follow-up. So basically, we've cleared all of that, and now we have status updates running into meetings, so everyone's aware before the meeting. So we've cut the meetings down to like 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, and all the dashboards are live, so there's no finding data. Now, it took a year to get there, and he came back to me and he was like, I see what you mean now. I was like, yeah, time is actually the sexiest thing ever, right? It might sound boring, but that was the goal that I set for them. Yeah.
That's a great story. That's a great title for a book you should write. Time is the sexiest thing ever.
That is a good book title. I'm going to park that one if I ever get around to writing a book. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much.